Hey everyone, my name is Eden Richardson, and thank you so much for joining in on today's online sermon. We hope that it blesses you and encourages you and challenges you as you listen. Please be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on all future online sermons as well. Thanks so much, and we look forward to seeing you here in person soon.
Today I want to preach from our memory verse for October. As you know, we have a memory verse each month. It's in our Bible reading plan. In our D groups, we memorize, practice, and recite it every month, or at least you're supposed to. Yeah. These are all verses we chose because they help you in having conversations with people about a relationship with Jesus. They're evangelistic verses. And if you want to be a witness, these verses will help you. So I urge you to memorize them. The verse for October was Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. Now, I want you to encourage me big time. How many of you have already memorized Hebrews 9:27? Y'all sure know how to make a guy feel good. Well, will you at least practice it with me today? This is an easy one to remember, okay? Would you stand? It's on the screen. Now, I want to read it to you first. Let's go to the verse, guys, on the screen. The words. Next slide. There we go. What it says is, and inasmuch as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment. Now, I will admit that part, and inasmuch as it is, can get a little confusing to memorize. It becomes a tongue twister, right? So when I'm witnessing to someone, sharing the gospel, I just start with, it is appointed. So can we practice it from that point forward? It is appointed, okay? You ready? Let's practice it together. It is appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment. Pretty good. Now let's do it without me. Ready? 1, 2. Now you think you can memorize that? Close your eyes right now. Ready? It is. Good. Think about it. Which comes first? Death, then what comes? Judgment. It is appointed to men to die once, and after this comes judgment. Great verse to use in talking to people about a relationship with Jesus. Thank you, and you can be seated. Now, I want to preach on this and do it, just really simple. Just clear, straightforward, logical, real simple. Because not only do I want you to understand this verse, I want you to know how to use it. Think about how you can use it in conversation with people about a relationship with the Lord. How many of you have ever in your life, at any moment, you've ever forgotten an appointment you had? Some of you are lying. You forgot it and just didn't show up, or you thought about it really late and showed up really late. I missed one years ago, and it's really embarrassing. Years ago, many years ago, there was a woman who loved the Lord, was active in our church. She died. I didn't forget the funeral. I did preach her funeral. She was cremated. So there was no burial immediately after the funeral. And they were not going to spread her ashes or bury her ashes a few days later or even a few weeks later. They were going to do it several months later. And they wanted to do it at 11 a.m. on the Friday after Thanksgiving. I agreed to it. At 11 a.m. the Friday after Thanksgiving, you know where I was? I was in the yard doing yard work. And at 11 o'clock, my cell phone rang. I'd forgotten. Now, the family, fortunately, was very gracious. They went on to lunch. It was just the immediate family, not a big crowd, so they went on to lunch. They went to Cracker Barrel, so it took a while. Food was good, but, gave me plenty of time to take a shower, get dressed, and I met them, and we did the brief service and buried her ashes. Embarrassing. But your memory verse, Hebrews 9:27, says there are two appointments you're not going to miss. Even if you would like to miss them, you're not going to miss them. Even if you forget about them, you're not going to miss them. Those two appointments, Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed unto men to die. That's an appointment you're not going to miss, no matter what. And then after that one, there's a second appointment, the judgment. You will stand before God and be judged. That's an appointment. You can't miss it. No matter how hard you try to miss it, you cannot miss either of those appointments. And it's interesting because when it says it is appointed unto man once to die, do you know what that word appointed means? Years ago, and some of you in here will remember this, others of you have never heard of it, but we would shop for Christmas, go to Walmart, Kmart, Sears. Two of those don't exist anymore practically. And we'd shop for Christmas gifts, right? And you put them on layaway. How many of you ever heard of layaway? Yeah, some of you. We buy it, and they would store it, or you'd order it, and they would get it in, and they would store it in their storage room in the back of the store. And you'd show up a few days before Christmas and get your Christmas gifts. That's what this word means. That God has stored away, laid up, reserved for you in the future these two appointments. They're already there. They're already on layaway. Death and judgment. And you can't escape them. You cannot escape death. It comes to the rich and poor, the old and young, the famous and the unknown. And death can come at any moment. I'm named after my father's favorite uncle. He was my grandfather's baby brother. His name was Steve Hogg. Not Stephen, not Stevie, no middle name. So when I was born, Dad would not let Mom give me a middle name. I'm not Stephen. My legal name is Steve Hogg, after Dad's favorite uncle. When I was in Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, I went by the family cemetery on the old farm. And I stood in front of that white military tombstone where my namesake is buried. He served in World War II. He was a member of Patton's army in Europe. After the war, he was living in Michigan, and one morning he got up and with a buddy went to a lake to fish. Sure, he didn't have anything on his mind but fishing that day. But knowing Steve's story and my family background, they probably had some liquid refreshment in that boat that can make you tipsy if you drink it. Because he tipped right on out of the boat and drowned. And I'm sure when he got up and went to the lake that morning, all he had on his mind was fishing, never thinking that would be the last day he would ever fish. Death is certain, and it can come at a moment you don't anticipate. You don't expect it. And your age is irrelevant. Over the years, I've preached hundreds of funerals. I've been preaching since I was 17. I've preached funerals for babies, young children, teenagers, college students, people who've died from disease and natural causes, car wrecks and suicide and any other number of reasons. When I was in college, preached a funeral of a mother who was in the mid-years of life. Her daughter Susie was 2 years behind me, 1 year behind Monisa in high school. It was a tragic funeral. Susie's mom had gone to the lake house in Tennessee. They had a small place. She'd gone there just to have a few days to get away and rest by herself. And that evening, she thawed out some fish and fried fish for dinner. What she didn't realize was apparently at some point before that, the electricity had gone out long enough for everything in her refrigerator, freezer to thaw. And then when the power came back on, that fish refroze. And it was spoiled. She went to the lake to rest and have fun, fried fish for dinner like any of us would do. And she died that night from food poisoning alone in her house, throwing up. Death can interrupt your plans in the blink of an eye. It's appointed to men to die once. You simply don't know when your appointment is. But it's real and it will come. Death is not the end of consciousness. You remember when Hugh Ross was here 3 weeks ago on our Apologetics Defending the Faith Sunday, and one thing he talked about that really caught my attention, and I've done a little research on it since, is that in all of the medical research and scientific study of the human brain, they have not been able to isolate and say this is the specific part of the brain that controls human consciousness. They can see many parts of the brain that are active and busy during consciousness, but they have not been able to say this is the part of the brain that controls consciousness. There's some new research that was just published this week, in fact, that says they've been able to see activity during consciousness in the deepest part of the brain. But they can't even say that's where it's controlled. They can just see that part of the brain is active during consciousness. And all of this supports the biblical teaching that we as human beings are not simply material, physical matter. As the Bible teaches, we also are spirit, soul. That's eternal. You remember when in Genesis God created Adam, that He fashioned a man from the dust of the ground, and here was this inanimate, physical, material body, but lifeless. Until God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and Adam became a living nefesh, a living being, a living soul, a living spirit. There are two parts to us as men and women, the physical and the spiritual, both as real as the other. And the Bible teaches that when we die, what happens? This physical material body returns to the earth from whence it came. Whether you decay or you are cremated, you return to dust. The Bible says the Spirit, God breathes into us this life, this soul that comes from God, returns to Him who gave it. Consciousness continues after death. And that's what he says in Hebrews 9:27. Notice he says, it is appointed, it's on layaway, it's already said out there in your future that you will die. And then it says, after this, after death, something else comes. Something else cannot come after death if there is not consciousness after death. If there is not existence and awareness after death. And he says, after death, what comes is judgment. And it's on layaway. It's reserved in your future just as death is. Just as you cannot escape death, you cannot escape the judgment. You can lie to yourself and say, well, I'm going to hang on, I'm going to hang on, I'm going to hang on and not die. But guess what? You will still die. You can say to yourself, there's no judgment, there's no judgment, there's no judgment. But guess what? There is a judgment. and you will face it. It is appointed just like death. When Monisa and I were in Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, one morning we visited the cemetery where her parents are buried so she could put flowers on the grave. Every time we go there, I notice my eyes are drawn to it. The graves of some of the niece family. Oh, about from me to you young ladies from where Monisa's parents are buried. And the reason I notice that is Ricky is buried there. Ricky was 1 year behind me. He was in Monisa's class in high school. Never knew him to do anything to indicate that he knew Jesus, was saved, loved Jesus, go to church, anything. A relationship with God. He was married, a young man in his early 20s, 2 little kids, not living for the Lord, could be kind of wild. And one Saturday night he was out partying and driving, and he'd had some of that liquid refreshment that you don't need to drink and drive. And he ran off the road in the middle of the night. Single car accident and was killed. I remember early that Sunday morning getting the phone call and going to his family's house. I was one of the pastors who spoke at his funeral, and I got to tell you, I couldn't give his family any hope. What was I going to say unless I lied? You try to comfort, you try to say good things, but you can't really give them hope. It was sad. And in fact, his wife said to me, he's in hell. And she was probably right. On the judgment day, he probably will not hear God say, enter into the joy of your Lord, but instead will hear God say, depart from me into the eternal flames prepared for the devil and his angels, because I never knew you. Everyone will face judgment, but it won't be the same experience for everyone. When we were in Kentucky a couple of weeks ago as well, Monisa spent one night with her Aunt Judy and her husband James. James is 89 years old. I've always, if you want to know what Judy looks like, just look at Monisa, just a taller version. James was a Marine. He's a Marine's Marine, you know what I mean? Good guy. Good guy, good heart. But he's a Marine. And, you know, when he was younger, he could be kind of, he's not really, but he could come across kind of stern, but he's not. He's a good guy. He just comes across that way. Any of y'all married to somebody like that? Good guy. But Monisa was telling me when they were talking that night, and then when I showed up the next morning to pick her up, he was talking to me. Man, he got misty-eyed. He loves Jesus. Loves Jesus. But he got misty-eyed because he wanted to thank me for what I'd done for his father. See, James is 22 years older than me. I didn't know him when I was growing up, but I knew his dad. I knew Boyd. Because Boyd was an old man who was friends with my grandfather and lived about a half a mile from the farm that we lived on. And I can remember many times going up with my grandfather and walking across the river on a swinging bridge to visit him. I was preaching a revival when I was in college at a little country church about a half mile from Boyd's house, and he called me. Asked me to come by his house. I did. Boyd gave his life to Jesus. That evening I picked him up and gave him a ride to the revival. And I still remember Boyd walking the aisle of that little church to make his public profession of faith in Jesus, and then later baptizing him in the Kentucky River right in front of his house, the same place that a few years later I would baptize my own father. And when we had Boyd's funeral, there was sadness, but man, there was joy. And I think James, being 89 and his health starting to fail and loving Jesus, thinking about his dad and getting teary-eyed, he's just so thankful that he knows his dad is in heaven and the judgment day is not something that his dad has to fear. For on the judgment day, I'm convinced that Boyd Gilly will hear God say, "Enter into the joy of your Lord." Death is appointed. You're alert afterward. And then there's the judgment. What will the judgment be like for you? Are you ready for death? Are you ready for the judgment? The difference in the story of Boyd and Ricky is Jesus. It's that simple. The difference is Jesus. Jesus. That's the reason verse 27 in Hebrews 9 is followed by verse 28, where he says, "So Christ also, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time for salvation without reference to sin to those who eagerly await him." Jesus, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, having been offered is in the passive voice, meaning it was done to Jesus. God the Father gave his Son to suffer for us. That's love. John 3:16, the verse most of us have memorized. Say it with me. God so loved the world, come on, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Notice how it begins. God so loved the world that he gave. God the Father gave his Son, offered his Son to suffer, to bear the penalty of our sin, my sin, your sin. But Jesus, the Son, was in complete agreement with the Father's plan. In the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 18, Jesus said, "No one has taken it," referring to his life. "No one has taken my life away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative." It was the Father's plan, but it was the Son's choice to bear the sins of many. As he was nailed to the cross to become sin for us, pay the penalty for our sin, and now, as a result, forgiveness is available. You don't have to earn it, you simply receive it. And when you receive forgiveness and receive Jesus as your Savior, you will be cleansed of your sin, your past failures, your past sin, your past guilt, washed away and cleansed, and you don't have to let that define you today. Jesus makes you a new person, giving you a new life with a new future. And he's coming back. Verse 28 says, when he appears the second time for salvation, with no reference to sin. When Jesus came the first time, it was because of sin and love, hanging on that cross to pay the penalty for your sin and earn forgiveness and salvation for you. When he comes back, he's bringing to all of us who know him and love him all the blessings, all the benefits of our salvation. That's the reason it says to those who eagerly await him, or as Paul said in his letter to Timothy, those who love his appearance. Because when you are right with Jesus and you love Jesus, you want to see Jesus, and you are ready for the coming of Jesus. You are ready for the judgment, and you are ready for death. But if you don't know Jesus, and you are not committed to Jesus, and you are not living for Jesus, and you have not been saved by Jesus, you are not ready for his coming. You are not ready for the judgment, and you are not ready for death. In fact, death, judgment, and the second coming are things for you to fear with every fiber of your being if you don't know Christ. So are you ready? Are you ready for death? We're going to observe the Lord's Supper in a moment after we sing a song and have a time of invitation, commemorating the death of Christ. Are you ready to see this Jesus face to face? Are you ready for the judgment day? If a drunk driver tomorrow swerves to the wrong side of the road and hits you head on and death comes to you, are you ready? Because in that blink of an eye, there's not time. Are you ready? Jesus died because he wants you to be ready. Isn't that ironic? Jesus died so you could be ready for death. Huh? He died so you wouldn't have to fear it. Are you ready? Are you ready right now, today, this moment, to get ready? If you don't know Christ, are you ready right now? Not tomorrow, not a year from now, not sometime in the future. Are you ready right now? Right now, when we sing this song, are you ready to give yourself to Jesus and be ready for all the future brings?